Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is the latest MCU film, so today we're going to rank them from worst to best. Hey everybody, my name's Justin here. I try to watch everything that hits theaters and on streaming services. If you guys like me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell notification for more up and coming content. And leave your list down below. How would you rank all of the MCU films? We are not going to be including the specials or the shows, anything like that, just movies. I'll probably do a ranking video for other things later on when more stuff comes out. Coming in last place is Thor: The Dark World, which easily could have been a dark and gritty Thor film with talented actors in here and a really good look to it. It ended up being a film that tried to juggle all these different genres. We had some comedy into it with more of Loki after fans just absolutely loved Loki in the Avengers film, and then we had some romance with Jane and Thor, and then we had the action. It just all did not work. On top of that, we had a pretty bad villain.
Disappointed!
Malekith, the villain in here, had nothing about him that was memorable. The writing for this character had no development. There was no urgency for this villain, despite Jane and having her story feel like it's at the front of all of the movie, and some moments with Thor and how he's trying to protect her. There's really nothing else that comes with the villain, and it's just very poor. This is easily one of the most boring MCU films and one that I do not care to watch. Coming in at number 30 is Iron Man 2. After the success of Iron Man, we had another Iron Man film right away, and they didn't stop to think, how could we actually tell a compelling story for Tony Stark?
Whoopsie daisy!
Instead, we get a lot of storylines that really never feel developed, a couple of villains that have very mediocre writing when it comes to Whiplash and Justin Hammer. Those characters I do not care about at all. Then we added in Black Widow to kind of move the Avengers along. At times, the pacing is really slow. At times, it's trying to do a lot. There's some odd jokes in here, what Tony Stark does. But overall, it's a film that's lacking action, compelling story for Tony Stark. After that first film and how it was set up so well, that's just ripped away from this, and it's just a weak story. Coming in at 29 is Eternals. This is a beautiful looking film with a really talented director and a really awesome cast. But this film, which easily could have been one of the most unique Marvel films, ended up being a film that just feels so stuffed. We have so many different characters fighting for screen time, so many storylines that are just going throughout the film, and you cannot connect with any of them. I could not remember any of their names, and I could not care less about any of the stories. It feels like a film that's so set apart from the MCU when we had some build up for a lot of the other characters. This had potential to have a storyline about these characters and what they've gone throughout time, but it ended up being a story that felt so slow, filled with beautiful visuals and some decent action scenes, but it is a stuffed film that really has nothing to tell. Coming at number 28 is Iron Man 3. I know a lot of you guys like Iron Man 3. This is just a film that I have really not been able to get past with the reveal of the villain. We have another classic story of another character that is affected by Tony Stark and wants to get revenge on him, and that storyline feels repetitive. The dialogue in here is pretty good. Shane Black is a really good director, and he injects his style into this movie. But that twist for the Mandarin, I remember seeing it in theaters and being so angry with how it ended up being, and then everything else after that, and the villain switch up. I did not care about that villain afterwards. Everything else was really good, beginning and all of the Mandarin and all of that, but everything else coming after that is just mediocre to me. And there are some really good action scenes, some really intriguing dialogue between characters. I could see the potential for this film, but it fell flat. Coming at number 27 is The Incredible Hulk. I really wish they would have kept Edward Norton and this style of the Hulk for the movies moving forward, because Edward Norton is a really talented actor and he does a great job as Bruce Banner within here. There is some really good action scenes coming at the end with the Abomination, but everything else leading up to that is a story that feels really thin. Like, you could tell that they wanted to go a little bit deeper with the story of Bruce Banner and what he's been going through, but it's just surface level. There's not many times where the film feels deep. You're not really looking at the conflict for Bruce Banner, and at times it feels very hollow. But this is a film that feels more mature than many other MCU films. And you look at the films now, it injects so much comedy into it, but this film feels more grounded than those other films. It was released through Universal before Disney all took over, so it feels really different compared to the other films. But I like Edward Norton in here. I think the Abomination storyline was really good. There's just some moments in here that really do not work. Coming in at 26 is Thor. The setup for Thor worked. It was beautiful, and I wanted to see that conflict between Loki and Thor, and everything on Asgard was amazing to me. And then we had this complete tone shift when we went to Earth, and it became a comedy that just was not funny. Thor is pretty funny, and those fish out of water sequences just became obnoxious.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
It was so focused on having Thor separated from Asgard and living on Earth and all of those moments that came with it that it forgot to develop Thor as a character. Once he comes to Earth, that is where like the character storyline halts for me, and that is where the story and everything else involved within the film just does not work. Coming in at number 25 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. While all the actors are pretty good in here and the visuals are once again just crazy and over the top, there's not much of a story to connect to. We have Star-Lord looking for his father and him trying to develop that relationship, but with a character that you care so much about from that first film, and then when we reveal who his father is and he's like the big villain of the film, it does nothing to add to those dramatic scenes within Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. You care about Star-Lord, you're on this journey with him, you want him to be able to find his father and everything within the film and have that relationship that he deserves. And it's just so weak in here, and the writing for it's so poor that you just can't connect to that one single story. Everything else kind of works, although the characters do feel separate at times and you're not getting those classic moments with the characters and the riffs back and forth. I do like the acting in here and the visuals, and Yondu has some of the best scenes within this movie, and that is what made the ending really work, is that relationship between Yondu and Star-Lord and how heartwarming it was. Because everything else just kind of felt paper thin.
I'm very poppin', y'all!
Coming in at 24 is Avengers Age of Ultron. This is the classic example of trying to go bigger. We had the first Avengers film that already was pretty big, but we had to do more. We have to have new characters in here, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who were pretty interesting but felt like very minor characters. And then we had Ultron, who was very terrifying just off of the trailers.
That's the best you can do!
But it was so focused on setting up future events that it forgot to focus on the current stories. When we had these visions of everything going on that was leading to Infinity War, and you feel like it was taken away from what this film really could have done. Because there are moments in here where we have these characters that are truly tested, like another big test for them as a group and seeing how they work together. Because the action is pretty fun in here. There are some big scenes in here, but just some of the development for the character and the story feels very slow and repetitive at times. You're adding in elements that really do not need to be there. You could have made it a little bit smaller for these characters and more personal, and adding to the action and the story with Ultron as well. But instead they took some characters in a different route. Coming in at number 23 is Black Widow. This is the film that came way too late, but I still like it. I think it is a fun film. Having Florence Pugh in here as setting up like the next character, next Black Widow in the MCU, I love that. She's so cool in this film. I love Florence Pugh as an actress. She's amazing, and she worked well alongside Scarlett Johansson. The end is very gimmicky. A lot of bad CGI in the film, and it's just very cartoony. Everything else, the family dynamics in here is a highlight of the movie. But I think this film just serves as a way to bring back Scarlett Johansson. She is a fan favorite character, and I like Black Widow, but this film could have came out years prior to Endgame, and I think it would have worked better. But we have a film that's kind of really concluding her story while also adding in new characters to move the storyline further. I like some of the spy elements to it. The family dynamics works in here. There's some pretty good action scenes. Taskmaster as a villain was a huge letdown. So overall, this film, it's pretty forgettable at times and just came way too late. Coming in at 22 is Doctor Strange. This is the coolest looking MCU film with all of the bizarre visuals and Doctor Strange doing what he does. It's just so amazing to look at. It does suffer some of those classic origin story tropes in here, but I do like the character of Doctor Strange. I will admit, I think the character of Doctor Strange is alright in the first film. Everything leading forward, the second film, Infinity War, any other appearance, the character has drastically changed for me. I thought that he was just really bland in the first film. There's a lot of potential for some deeper story for this character, some development, but it's really focused on the visuals and him becoming Doctor Strange, and I like all of that. And I think it forgot some of the more personal elements to this character. But any other time that I've seen this character, especially in Infinity War, I really like him. And he's become one of my favorite MCU characters. If you would ask me years ago, the first Doctor Strange movie, I said he was all right. Coming in at number 21 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is a fun film. It's got some, some good villains and a pretty just kind of average villain with Sonny Birch within here, but Ghost is a really unique character that has some, a tragic storyline in here. I love seeing more of the Wasp in here and her working alongside Ant-Man. I love the use of him becoming big and taking objects and making them big and having them become small again. That's a lot of fun moments that add to some of the fun action scenes within here. At times, the film feels incredibly average with its villain and the story for that and wanting to get revenge. Unfortunately for Ant-Man and the Wasp, it doesn't have like that one scene, that one moment that makes it stand out from other movies. Visually, it's a good film. Paul Rudd is funny. He brings that charisma to Scott Lang. Evangeline Lilly is great as Wasp. I really like the characters in here. It's a film that's okay with being just fine. It doesn't really do much to stand out from other films. It doesn't do anything to make it a bad film. It's just one of those films that's just okay. And I'm fine with that. I enjoy watching Ant-Man and the Wasp. I obviously care about the other two films compared to this film, but it is still a lot of fun. Coming at number 20 is Captain Marvel. I think this is a pretty fun film. There are some unique action scenes in here. I like seeing a younger version of Nick Fury in here. The journey of Captain Marvel is a bit of an odd journey because we see her as very strong, then she has amnesia, and then she's learning about who she is, and then we already know kind of her abilities. So we're delaying that process. We're delaying the end goal of this movie and seeing her become very strong and all powerful when we already know how that works. And so when she realizes what she can actually do, it's not as impactful as we want it to be because of the setup. I think this could be one of those films that work more as an origin story and seeing a linear story for this character rather than, starting off her and seeing all of her abilities and then kind of taking that away and then bringing it back at the end. It just doesn't hit as hard as it should, as we got in the beginning and what we know of this character. I like Brie Larson. I really like her in here as well. I like the different setting for the MCU, but it's not as strong as I hoped it would have been. Coming in at number 19 is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. For a film that's titled Multiverse of Madness, it doesn't deliver on the madness. I expected a lot more in here. I like seeing John Krasinski and Captain Carter and all of those moments. That's what I wanted, is just a bunch of odd cameos left and right. That was a lot of fun. I think the film could have benefited from having more madness, but Sam Raimi definitely brings his flair to this movie. We have some horror moments in here, some really creepy, disturbing stuff in here. But the storyline for Wanda and her trying to find her kids already feels done. We had WandaVision, her wanting to be with her children and her protecting that reality. It's kind of doing the same thing again in here, but with Doctor Strange and just going a little bit further into it. There's so many ways that her storyline could have been solved in her getting her children, but it feels like it's just doing the same thing over again. And even though Elizabeth Olsen gives a more dramatic performance in here and a more terrifying performance, I still think it's a storyline that feels borrowed from WandaVision, despite having new elements to it. The multiverse and Doctor Strange within here and all of the crazy moments from Sam Raimi. It's still a storyline that I feel like I already saw and I just don't want to see again. Coming in at number 18 is Spider-Man Far From Home. I enjoyed this film the first time I saw it, but then I looked more at the story, especially for Peter Parker. It's weak. Having the glasses given to Peter Parker and they are given to him by Iron Man, I didn't really vibe with that story. There are so many odd scenes in here, especially with using the glasses to have this strike on the bus. It's stupid. There is a lot of moments in here I just find to be dumb.
It's really so stupid.
And there are a lot of moments that I did like. I really like Peter Parker. I like looking at that high school story and him with his friends. Those are classic Spider-Man storylines that I do like. And having some cool villains in here and having the cool villain of Jake Gyllenhaal playing Mysterio, even if it's the same kind of story. Someone that hates Tony Stark and they are hurt by him. It's the same exact story for other villains, and it's just kind of the same thing done over and over again. It's nothing new. So when you learn about it, it's just not as shocking as, I guess, the first time you saw it. Even though Jake Gyllenhaal is pretty cool in here, and there are some really good visuals, and I like Spider-Man in here, there's a lot of plot lines in here that feel very mediocre and are doing a poor job of developing the story for Peter Parker. Coming in at number 17 is Thor Love and Thunder. This had a lot of potential to be one of the best MCU films, looking at the connection between Thor and Jane Foster, bringing her back into the film. There was some potential in here, but it's a film that's just so stuffed with the humor that it is taken away from some of the dramatic scenes. It's halting some of those scenes that really could add development to the relationship between Jane Foster and Thor. When you look at that relationship, I did appreciate how they were able to bring in some of the past moments and understand what went wrong between the two. But then you have that humor. Although I do find a lot of it to be funny. I laughed. The screaming goats became annoying quite often. There's a lot of jokes that just ruined certain scenes. Christian Bale is terrifying as Gore the God Butcher. They didn't do much with this storyline though. They didn't add any dramatic scenes to him. Despite him trying to save his daughter again, there was a lot lacking from that character. I like that he's terrifying and the looks are pretty good. It's just there's a lot missing from him. That's what I feel about Thor Love and Thunder. It's just missing certain moments. It's missing that one emotional scene, but it's being replaced with many jokes in here, those screaming goats. So on one hand, I like Thor Love and Thunder. It's funny. It's got that great visuals from Thor Ragnarok, but on the other hand, the story's weak because of those comedy scenes and Gore the God Butcher that have that dramatic scene that he's supposed to be given to within this film. Coming at number 16 is Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This film had a huge task, and it was dealt a bad hand after the death of Chadwick Boseman. But I think that this film did all the right things it could to honor the legacy of Chadwick Boseman while also moving the story forward. Having the moments with the characters mourning the loss of T'Challa within the film, and having Namor introduced in here, and having Shuri in here kind of taking that mantle. It's all the right things that they could have done for this film. It's a good story with a lot of great visuals. At times it does feel just a little bit too long in here. Like they could have cut out certain scenes, especially with Ironheart within this film. But for what they were given and the storyline that they had to create, they did the best thing possible. Honoring the legacy of Chadwick Boseman, you felt those emotional scenes every time they discussed T'Challa within here, and having Namor, I absolutely love that. I can't wait to see more of that. Coming in at 15 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This film had a hard time getting started. It felt very clunky and just kind of all over the place. It delivered on the weirdness of the quantum realm, but it was trying to have this mystery of Janet and who she met in the quantum realm, and it just was all over the place. The scenes felt very brief. You had Cassie and the relationship with her father and what's been missing over the last 5 years. It just felt like it was all over the place. But once you introduce Kang, that's where the story feels more focused. Jonathan Majors was terrifying as Kang. I cannot wait to see Avengers Kang Dynasty. There's so many cool things they can do with it. MODOK was severely underused and very bizarre, and I wanted to see more of that. But the first half of the film just felt really all over the place. Bill Murray is in here. We come across these odd creatures. That's pretty funny at times. And then we have Kang, where it becomes more serious. But Scott Lang is still delivering those jokes. That's just the character. He handles these serious moments with jokes. But I was impressed with those moments that they never took away from those dramatic scenes. Like I talked about Thor Love and Thunder. Too much humor that took away from those dramatic scenes. These action scenes, these big intense moments had some humor, but it never took away from that tone, because Kang was absolutely terrifying in here, and it just added to that tone. And we had the characters that were trying to cope with everything, having that humor, and it worked. It was never overpowering the action scenes, and I found that to be impressive. Coming in at number 14 is Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This was a fun action film. There were so many cool things about this film. The villain was complex. He had a lot of human traits to him, a storyline that you were on board with and you wanted to kind of see it play out. That's due to the very strong opening of this film. But Shang-Chi is a character that's really likable. Awkwafina in here is adorable. I loved her working alongside Shang-Chi, and everything in here just was action-packed. It had a story about family and finding yourself and your true identity. All of those themes were very strong in here. It does suffer from typical Marvel moments despite a really unique character and setting. It's an overall really fun film that I can't wait to see more of. Shang-Chi, really likable character, funny moments in here, a villain that you are siding with and you are caring about that development and that personal connection to the story. Coming in at number 13 is Iron Man. This is a perfect example on how to do an origin story. The way that Tony Stark was built up in the beginning of the movie, his character drastically changes throughout the film for the better. He was very self-centered in the beginning of the film, and as we develop this character, he wants to use his suit for good. And I love that change of heart for this character, and the way that the character was set up and him having those drastic moments, those moments that really test him. He overcomes all of that, and the journey for Tony Stark is so worth this film. Jeff Bridges is also very good in here. His character, his villain, feels very cliche at times, but it's a smaller villain for Tony Stark. For everything that he's gone through throughout his time in the MCU, it's a very smaller villain, but it's a test for Tony Stark. It's a great start to the MCU, a great start to Iron Man. Coming in at number 12 is Ant-Man. Paul Rudd is so good as Scott Lang. This is a character that you just love. You're rooting for. You want to see him change his ways, and we see that progression throughout the film for this character. It's a much smaller film compared to other MCU films. We have a character that's been in jail and is trying to change his life around, and we are on board with that kind of story. The villain Yellow Jacket is pretty average and a storyline that feels reminiscent of earlier MCU films, so there's really nothing groundbreaking in terms of that storyline, but the action and the visuals are really good in here. It's a story that's a lot of fun, really utilizes Hank Pym in here as well. I like that chemistry that they have, that relationship that develops, all of the ants. It's a lot of fun. Coming in at number 11 is Black Panther. This was a great film for Black Panther. After having him in Civil War, we got a little taste of who this character is and his personality and his morals as well. And we see that play out within this film. On top of that is a lot of great world building for Wakanda, all of the characters within it, conflict for T'Challa and how he's overcoming certain things like his father's death and how he is taking on this mantle. Not only do we have the progression for T'Challa in this film, but also the progression for Wakanda as well. Michael B. Jordan here as Killmonger is one of the best MCU villains. It is a villain that you're rooting for as well, and you like to see his storyline play out in the film. You know, he's doing some questionable things within the film, but it is a villain that you really do care about, and that is a nice change of pace for the MCU with its villain, where we have a lot of villains that feel very typical and average, and there's really no developing storyline. This storyline for Killmonger is one of the best for a villain. It just adds so much to this film. Coming in at number 10 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Just like Killmonger, the Vulture is one of the best villains. It adds so much to this film. There's a lot of intense sequences between the Vulture and Spider-Man, but also a villain that you just really like because he's just trying to protect his family. But Tom Holland as Peter Parker, really good. I loved him in his brief appearance in Civil War, and here with his own film, it's really focused on those high school moments. Grappling with him being Spider-Man and his newfound kind of role alongside Tony Stark, it really starts to weigh him down, and we see this character trying to navigate all of that high school relationships, him being Spider-Man, and he really enjoys it, but wants to do a lot more. And we see him just kind of take on a smaller role in this film. But this was a great introduction to Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Coming at number 9 is The Avengers. This first team-up movie of The Avengers was just a pure, enjoyable cinematic experience. I remember going to the movies, seeing this, and just being so hyped to see it, having all of the characters that had their individual films leading up to this storyline that feels realistic for a superhero team up. They're all not going to get along, but they're going to argue constantly, but they have to rely on each other. I would have hated a film if they just, trusted each other immediately and everything was fine and dandy. I wanted to see a film where they struggle and they have to learn each other's abilities and trust each other. And that's what this film does so well, is that development of this group and how they have to rely on each other, they have to trust each other, and we see that development. It's handled so well in here. A lot of big action scenes as the team is getting together against Loki. It's a lot of fun. Coming in at number 8 is Guardians of the Galaxy. This was a film I really didn't know much about going into it. I didn't know a lot about the Guardians, and I came out of it absolutely loving this group. From Star-Lord to Gamora to Drax to Groot. These are all characters that I love, and seeing them all work alongside each other within this film against their wishes, they are there to protect each other, and I love that. This film is energetic. James Gunn just pours his heart into this film. The style is really upbeat. The pacing moves very quick. The story is engaging. You get to know these characters within this film. The soundtrack is so fun in here. It really amps up the action scenes. Guardians of the Galaxy has always been one of my favorite MCU films, and I'm looking forward to Volume 3. Coming in at number 7 is Thor Ragnarok. This film was so different from Thor and Thor the Dark World, and I think they needed a change. Bringing Taika Waititi in here, you were able to have a style that is so vastly different than the previous two films.
Okay, I like it. All right.
That change of direction was very needed for the Thor franchise. If they would have kept the same style as Thor the Dark World, I'm not sure it would have been as high up on this list. But Taika Waititi brings his flair. It's funny, it's action-packed, balances it so well, and creates such a unique experience. Coming in at number 6 is Captain America: The First Avenger. I love the first Captain America film. I know a lot of people have it lower on the list, but I love the style to it. We see the character of Steve Rogers and how he will not give up. Captain America is my favorite MCU character, and I love what he stands for, and we see that set up within this film. The action is really good. The villain is intense. We just see that the relationship between Bucky and Steve Rogers is explored very well throughout here. I love the style. It's so different from other MCU films. It's a great origin story, and that character of Steve Rogers, and he will not give up. He is determined. He wants to help out. It's explored in here in the best way possible. Coming in at number 5 is Spider-Man: No Way Home. This is a complete fan service movie. We wanted Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in here, and there was times where I was worried that they would not be in here. They were, and it was epic as can be. Having Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield all teaming up together is a dream come true. It is a complete fan service movie, and I'm okay with that. I absolutely loved it. This was one of the best theater experiences. Seeing them and their little introductions, I was so excited for that. But the film cannot just have that be its main point of pure enjoyment. We also have other villains from previous Spider-Man films come in here. It is a really unique story that really challenges Tom Holland. He's got a lot on his plate, and there are a lot of emotional moments to where we see this character really come out and is more mature than ever within this film, and we see that progression, that development for this character that makes Tom Holland so likable as Spider-Man. But the action scenes are so exciting. Having the villains, having Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield in here, there are so many moments in here that you just want to cheer and scream. It's so fun, and this is one of the best Spider-Man films. Coming in at number 4 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This political thriller was so different from what I expected it to be. Going off of the first Avenger into this film, I thought it would be more in line with the first Avenger, but we got a more mature, dramatic take for Captain America as he's struggling to live in the current world. And we have Bucky, who is now the Winter Soldier, and how he's trying to protect him. He knows that that's not Bucky, it's the Winter Soldier, and he will fight to protect his friend. The way that the action scenes are handled, it really amps up those scenes, and you're just so invested with what is going on. Coming in at number 3 is Captain America: Civil War. I never thought this kind of film would come forth. Seeing Iron Man and Captain America take different sides, and all of the characters choose a side and fight against each other, and didn't think it would happen. But it was a right move for the time of the MCU. You can't keep doing the same thing. You got to have a different storyline for these characters and test them. You have to have these characters move in different ways. You have to bring their opinions and personalities out within this film. And that's exactly what Civil War does, is that you realize that the characters are not all the same. Just because they have superpowers, they're not going to have the same beliefs. And that is explored so well in here, and seeing the different sides and choosing a side. And the airport sequence is so fun, seeing all the characters fight against each other. other. It is action packed, but having new introductions in here like Spider-Man and Black Panther, I love that. This is a great Captain America film. At times I forget it even is a Captain America because it just kind of feels like an Avengers film. Coming in at number 2 is Avengers Infinity War. I've watched this film, I think, more than any MCU film. Before it was released, before Endgame was released, I think I watched it like every day for like 2 weeks straight. I had such a good time with this. You really feel that urgency from Thanos within here. I think this is the most intimidating Thanos is in all of the MCU films. I was shocked with the way that it ended, but seeing the characters all come together and they're meeting for the first time, it adds for some, hilarious moments within it, but then you just get that sense of dread and urgency within this film. Infinity War explored that and brought all of the characters in different parts of the world and outer space as well, but whatever they were doing, you felt like they had one common goal, and that was to get to Thanos. If it was in Wakanda or somewhere else, they're all doing the same thing. And it was crazy that Thanos was able to do that within this film, is create panic all over the place, no matter where the characters were. The action is so good. There's so many crowd-pleasing moments. The way that the characters interact with each other, it's funny, it's heartbreaking at times. Infinity War is so good. But coming in at number 1 is Avengers Endgame. The build-up throughout the MCU to this film, it was a great payoff. There are so many chilling moments in here when Captain America gets the hammer, or when everybody's coming through the portals.
On your left.
There are so many moments that you realize this is what they were doing from that first Iron Man film all the way up to this. They had a mission, and it was to build Thanos up throughout it and all of the characters and have them come together to fight Thanos. I'm so worried with the upcoming phases because I just don't get that same feeling from phase 4 and phase 5. But this film, emotional at times, you're loving the characters, the action scenes are thrilling, having all of the characters come forth together. It's some of the best comic book moments of all time. This film is a buildup of everything you love and done in the right way. It is long, it's action packed, it's funny, it's emotional, had that sense of dread and urgency done at its best within this film. It's going to take a lot to do what Endgame did, but I'm really excited for Kang Dynasty and the other Avengers films and seeing what they're able to do. So there you guys have it. All the MCU films ranked worst to best. How would you rank them? Let me know in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for more up and coming content like this. My name is Justin Watches Movies, and you guys stay classy, YouTube.